Hi, everyone. Welcome to Being Patient Brain Talks. I'm Deborah Kan, founder of Being Patient. Today, we're going to talk about a topic I certainly have tried to do over and over again, but haven't admittedly can say I've mastered it. That is meditation. We have been reading about meditation and how good it is for your brain, but we've decided to actually go where the science lies, and that is with our next guest. That's Dr. Sara Lazar. She's with Harvard University. She's a neuroscientist who studies yoga and meditation and what impact it has on our brains. So, Sara, thanks so much for joining us and welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Sara, let's start with one of the first studies you conducted. Tell us a little bit about what you found. What did meditation do to improve really our brain health?
Right. So the very first study we did was we looked at long-term meditators and we compared them to controls. And we found that there were several brain regions where there's more gray matter in the long-term meditators compared to the controls. And that was the first evidence that meditation could actually change your brain, which was pretty novel at the time. So then we followed up that study, looking at people going through an 8-week meditation-based stress reduction program. And what we found is that even after 8 weeks, we could start to see changes in brain structure and function. And so that's really, again, was really novel at the time, demonstrating that even a short period could have real impacts on people.
When you say that it actually added gray matter, what exactly does that mean? Does that mean we're adding brain cells? What does that mean?
Right. So we know that only in one part of the brain called the hippocampus do you actually get new neurons. But what we know is that neurons look a little bit like trees. And although we're born with all the neurons that we're going to have, we can greatly change the number of branches and the number of roots, and also we can change where those branches and roots are rooted in the brain. And so we weren't able to look at this, but in animal studies, what they've shown is that when you get these similar sorts of changes in brain structure, they can actually go in and chop up the brains of the animals, and they show that you can get greatly dramatic changes in the number of branches, the number of roots, and or the direction where they're going. So we think that's what's happening here.
So you mentioned the hippocampus, which is, as we know, the area of the brain that's responsible for memory.
Yeah.
And in all people with Alzheimer's, the hippocampus is what usually it goes first.
Yep.
In terms of brain degeneration. So do we know? I mean, you were talking earlier. We were talking about the frontal cortex of the brain. Do we know if meditation has any impact on the hippocampus?
Yes. So that was one of the main regions we found in the 8-week study was the hippocampus and also the posterior cingulate cortex. And both of those regions are the ones that are most strongly impacted in Alzheimer's disease. Both of them get smaller with Alzheimer's, and both of them got bigger with meditation.
So does that mean actually when we're seeing more neurons in those areas, or you said we couldn't add except for the hippocampus, is that right?
Right, exactly. So PCC is probably just connections.
Okay. Now, when we meditate, what is happening inside our brain to make it stronger? I mean, we know we're told all the time for the best brain health, we need to change patterns of thinking, do things that are outside our comfort zone. And that's all hooked into neuroplasticity, right? It's like
exactly.
If you change the way the neurons are traveling inside your brain, that's actually really good for your brain health.
Right.
What does meditation do exactly? What are we doing to our brains when we meditate?
Right. So we have many of the puzzle pieces. There's still a few pieces missing, but what it's looking like is that when we meditate, certain parts of our brain, including the hippocampus and the PCC, become less active. They become more quiet. And the PCC, the posterior cingulate cortex, that's the main region associated with mind wandering. And again, it's the area that's destroyed by Alzheimer's disease. And the idea is that as it gets destroyed, we have more mind wandering. And then as it gets thicker, it's becoming less active. And so the idea is there's a phrase in neuroscience called neurons that fire together, wire together. And this is the job of the hippocampus. And so the idea is that, as you're meditating, it's sort of like exercise, physical exercise. That, as you activate a certain region, there's going to be more branches and roots in that area because there's more activity, so it's going to attract more branches and roots, and those are going to get strengthened over time. Just like the more you work out your arm muscles, the more you work a brain area, the bigger it's going to get, the more complex the connections are going to become, and it's going to get bigger.
So this might be a really crude explanation of things, but I always thought when we meditate, we're taking our brain waves on different levels, alpha, delta, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Is that true? Is that what's also strengthening them?
Yes, exactly. And so again, there's not a lot known. There's some known, but alpha, beta, gamma, delta, they refer to there's different types of neurons and different types of neural activity within the brain. And also the brain is composed of layers. And so the different types of activity have to do with the different layers. And the different layers have to do with the information coming in or coming out, or where in the brain they're talking to, this sort of thing. So and so all of that's definitely happening. And it's sort of different ways, like I said, so different pieces of the puzzle. So we have a little bit of the alpha, beta, gamma, delta information. We have a little bit of the brain activity, and we have a little bit of brain structure, and they're all telling us different bits of information.
So do we take our brain, are the waves on different, is there a simplistic way to explain it, like going from alpha to gamma or to delta?
No, it's been a bit of a mess. There have been so many different studies, and they've all found different things. So the thing is, there's not one unique form of meditation. There's a lot of different ways of meditating. And also what's really clear to anyone who's ever practiced is that, when you first start out, you practice a little bit differently, and then as you get more experience, it shifts a little bit, and you practice a little bit differently, and then you practice more, and it shifts a little bit. And so, it's really clear that each of those is going to change brain activity a little bit. In different ways. So it could be that beginners are more sort of, it's about alpha and beta, but then as long-term meditators, it gets more into the gamma. But that's not even, it depends a little bit on what type of meditation they're doing. There's a lot of different factors to it.
What type of meditation did you study? What was the cohort practicing?
Right. So for the pre-post study, we're looking at mindfulness-based stress reduction. And so mindfulness, it's derived from Buddhist meditation, but it's very secular. So there's no Buddhist philosophy included, and it's pretty much divorced from all the religious connotations. And it's just being aware of breath and body sensations in the present moment in this non-judgmental way. And that's actually a big question: is to what extent does Eastern philosophy influence brain activity as well? And it could. We just don't know. But that's the general idea, is that the short clinical ones have a very secular form of meditation.
So tell us a little bit about how often people had to meditate for you to see an impact on their brains.
Right. So in our study, people practiced on average 30 minutes a day. But we know because we asked people to write it down, some people really practice, because they were told to practice 40 minutes a day. So we know some people actually practice 40 minutes a day every day. Some people practice 40 minutes a day a couple times a week. Some people practice just 5 or 10 minutes a day, occasionally. Some people practiced all over the place. And so so it was on average 30 minutes a day. And we don't yet have done the experiment to know exactly how much you need to practice. There have been other people doing studies, though, showing that even like a week or two of practice, you can start to see some changes in brain structure and function. So and in terms of behavioral metrics like symptom reduction, we definitely know that even 5 or 10 minutes a day can be really powerful.
And that's not much. I mean, 30 to me, 40 is daunting. You really have to build up to that amount. But 5-10 minutes a day, I think that's pretty doable for most of us.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's clear. I mean, again, it's sort of like physical exercise. The more you practice, the more you're going to benefit. But even 5 or 10 minutes a day can really, in terms of like just taking the edge off the stress and helping people calm down, it's really good.
What's interesting in what you've told us to me is that, we've interviewed neuroscientists who are studying the role of exercise. And it turns out we probably know the most about aerobic exercise and the impact on the brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
20 to 30 minutes a day of aerobic exercise actually adds mass to your hippocampus, right? Matter to your hippocampus. It's interesting that meditation can do the same thing, and it's not aerobic. We're still what do you think that's an indication of? I mean, if you had to play private investigator in this, what would you draw as similarities in the two?
Right. It's a good question. So, and they don't really understand why exercise should impact brain structure. I mean, there's a lot of different ideas about there's blood flow. There's something called brain-derived neurotropic growth factor. There is sort of a little bit of a mental training component to exercise because you have to, not force yourself, but you have to, practice daily, and there's a certain amount of willpower and executive control functions. And that's a little bit true with meditation as well, because again, you have to get yourself there, and you have to not force yourself, but you need to get yourself to sit every day. And then while you're sitting and practicing, of course, your mind starts to wander off. And so then you have to it's called meta awareness. You have to be sort of monitoring what your mind is doing to make sure you're staying on track. And then when it does wander off, you have to remember, oh yeah, got to bring it back. And there's a couple other instructions to help keep you focused and with the right mindset. And so again, it's sort of an executive function kind of task. It's not just sort of passively sitting there doing nothing.
Sorry, go ahead.
And then also there is some evidence that similar to exercise that you can get increases in brain-derived neurotropic growth factor. And again,
what does that mean exactly?
Oh, so it's basically it's a hormone. It's a growth hormone in the brain, and that seems to help with neuroplasticity.
So did you also study yoga in this?
We've done a little bit with yoga. We did another study where we looked at long-term meditators and long-term yoga practitioners, because that's always the question I get, is that people say, well, I don't meditate, but I do yoga. And so to try to study that, we took long-term yoga practitioners and long-term meditation practitioners. And what we found is, for the most part, they look very similar to each other. They weren't identical, but and there are some subtle differences, but for the most part, they look very similar. So it does suggest that, and we chose a very mindful form of yoga. But again, sort of the exercise analogy, it's sort of like, swimming versus running versus golf. All of them are going to have general cardiovascular benefits, but there are subtle differences between, them in terms of exactly which muscles are built up, and, strength training versus cardio is a little bit different, these sorts of things. So it does seem like the different types of yoga and meditation, they will have some unique benefits, but also some common benefits.
I always thought, though, with yoga, if we do our inversions, meaning the positions where our head is facing down, that's supposed to be good as well, because it's sending more blood flow to your brain. Is that too simplistic?
Yeah, a little bit, but that's not bad. I mean, definitely there is evidence that just getting blood into the brain is beneficial, right? So it's going to be beneficial, but that's probably going to be more of a general effect across the whole brain as opposed to specifically for a few regions.
So Sara, tell us where the research is heading. I know you recently published a new study. Tell us a little bit about that and what we're learning in terms of, meditation.
Right. So our brand new study, we looked at fear conditioning. So it's a classical sort of like, most people, when they think about conditioning, they think about Pavlov's dogs, right? You hear a bell and, get food, and then they start salivating to the bell. So we did the same thing, but with a painful shock. So they saw a light and got a painful shock. And they learned that the light represented getting shocked. And then we showed them the light, but we didn't shock them. So they learned that the light was okay. So the key thing was then on day 2, we brought them back the next day and we showed them the light, but we didn't shock them. And the question is, how do they respond to that light? And what we found is that they were better at remembering that the light meant that they weren't getting shocked, which is more consistent with a healthy response, as opposed to people with anxiety tend to respond like they're getting shocked again. Also, what was really cool, what we found was that the hippocampus was more connected to the area of the hand where they were getting the shock. And that this was very strongly related with stress reduction and with anxiety levels. And the idea being that they were remembering that they weren't being shocked. They were actually being mindful of their hand while they were being shocked and not being shocked, and that they're remembering that, which is really sort of beautiful and interesting, because it really sort of shows that, yes, they were doing what they were being told to do. But the cool thing was that they weren't actually told to meditate, or we didn't tell them how to do anything they just went through the shock experience, and we didn't give them any instructions on how to do it. So they naturally, spontaneously became more mindful of their hand while they were being shocked and not shocked.
Is there, in that exhibits that we have the brain has so much control over the body, right? And what we feel and how we interpret that. Is there any reason to believe that meditation would be good if you've already been diagnosed with MCI or Alzheimer's disease?
Yeah, there's been several studies demonstrating that for early Alzheimer's, very like mild cognitive impairment stage still, that definitely there are some changes in brain structure and functioning, including the hippocampus. And there's also some slight gains in some cognitive tests. And there was one study, it was a year and a half, I guess it was a 2-year study in the Canary Islands. They actually saw a reversal of symptoms. They actually found people having improvements in their cognitive scores, which is really fantastic. And so there was no brain imaging in that study, so it really needs to be replicated. And right now we're recruiting people for a study to do a 6-month study of mindfulness. So if anyone knows any patients.
Would you take people with MCI or early stage?
Yeah, so MCI specifically, yeah.
We know several, so we'll point them your way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we're looking for subjects.
So we're getting some questions here, and one viewer is asking, have there been any studies on Tai Chi? That's a good question, because that's body and mind at the same time, right?
Right. So similar to yoga, we have one Tai Chi study with depression showing there's changes in the insula. So the ability to pay attention inside your body happens with Tai Chi, which makes a lot of sense, because Tai Chi is all about feeling your body, but also like sending the energy. So yeah, and again, sort of like running versus swimming, that there's going to be similarities and also differences.
I spend part of my time in the year in Hong Kong, and on my morning run, there's always, a group of, I'd say 70 to 80-year-olds doing Tai Chi. They're amazingly fit, so there's something in that.
Yeah.
So we have another question too. Someone's asking, what's your opinion about the Bredesen reverse protocol? I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Dale Bredesen and the research that has been done. Are you familiar with his research?
No, sorry. No, what does he do?
He has developed a protocol to really treat and prevent Alzheimer's through both, lifestyle and other matters, other ways. It's just a very holistic, but also, comprehensive approach. So,
because it's certainly, more and more evidence is demonstrating that, inflammation is definitely a key component of Alzheimer's. And so, I think anything you can do to decrease your inflammation is a good thing.
Absolutely. So did you see, have we gone that far with the studies? Can we have control through lifestyle, things like yoga and meditation? Does that impact inflammation, or do we not know that yet?
Yeah, no, there's a few studies. I've not been involved in those studies, but other people have definitely shown that there's definitely some indications that yes, it can help with that. And also, you're less stressed, and we know that stress contributes to inflammation. So even if it's not actively reducing inflammation, it's going to help prevent it developing in the future.
So what's amazing to me is you really found that it doesn't take much to change the brain, right?
Right.
Even how many people were in that first cohort of?
It was I think about 28 people, I think. Yeah.
Okay, and did you have some who didn't meditate, or how did you run that study? How did you make the comparison?
Yeah, so people, half the group, that's true, I think that, so that actually was 40 people, I think, actually. So half the group went through mindfulness training, another half was a wait list. So we scanned them 8 weeks apart, but then after the 8 weeks, then they went into the class. And so we have that as a control, which is very important to have control conditions in these studies.
Yeah, absolutely. And will you be testing different types of meditation, or can we just assume just mindfulness does the trick?
Right. Again, sort of like running versus swimming, they're all going to be good. There's been a couple studies with compassion meditation, which is also showing that it has very beneficial effects. Tai Chi, yoga. And then there have been a couple studies with transcendental meditation as well. There's not been a study, we did one study where we compared relaxation response to mindfulness and showed that there's some similarities and some differences. But there's not been a study comparing like mindfulness to mantra meditation, say. And that would be good to do, but yeah, we haven't done that yet.
I think the hardest part about meditation is getting started. it's just getting into the rhythm. I've used a few tools. There's online tools that can help, and you understand really how to start meditating. But it's the consistency and it's building it into a busy schedule that's the hardest. But It's really exciting news to talk about, people who have MCI or early stage Alzheimer's being able to potentially reduce memory loss and change their brains. I think there's a lot of hope in that. And so, why not? Meditation can never hurt, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about when the next study is, and exactly what you're looking for.
Right. So we're just finishing up. So hopefully we'll be publishing it soon. A study with people 65 to 80, so healthy people 65 to 80, to ask the question, can older people benefit? And are the changes similar to what we see with the younger people? So hopefully that'll be coming out soon. And like I said, we're just starting to recruit now people with MCI. And so hopefully we'll see what's happening there. So stay tuned. And then we're just really interested in general in cognition. So how meditation influences memory and attention and other executive functions. And so we're trying to do some more studies with that.
Thank you, Sara. Thank you for your research. Thank you for your time. And please keep us posted. I think that's really exciting. Your field of research is really exciting and really interesting to a lot of us. So thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So if you want to see if you missed any part of this interview or want to send it on to friends who could be interested, we post all of our interviews on beingpatient.com under Being Patient Brain Talks. Those are our expert talks. You can always find them on our website, and join our Facebook group if you haven't already done so to hear more of these interviews. Thanks, Sara, and we will keep in touch.
Thank you.